I have ranked many things in RimWorld, from weapons to armor to biomes and factions and animals, a lot of stuff, but today we are ranking all Psycasts in RimWorld. We're gonna be ranking them basically on how useful they are and also how cool they are, because some of them are pretty cool. Now keep in mind that some of these require certain Psylink level from 1 to 6, and usually it is the way that the higher level it requires, the higher the heat gain is gonna be when you actually use them, so you won't be able to use them and spam them a lot. Now let's start ranking. Let's begin with the level 1 Psycasts. And first one over here we have is Burden. This is a 1 target, 20-second slow. So basically the best use for this is if you maybe want to slow an animal that went berserk after you tried to hunt it, so it gives your hunter a chance to shoot it down. Or maybe, you know, if there's raiders coming at you and there's a very dangerous melee guy that you want to avoid, you can slow that one. It's got somewhere in the middle of the pack when it comes to usefulness. It's nothing too cool, so we're gonna put this one into B tier. Next on the list is Pain Block. This one is really self-explanatory. It drops the target's pain levels down all the way to 10% for I think a minute or two, and basically this is used to maybe save a pawn that is really hurting, and it's, you know, because of the pain levels his consciousness is so lower that he can't even get up, and maybe, you know, that way you can get him out of harm's way. But usually it's not the greatest way to actually try rescuing somebody, so we're gonna put this one into C tier. Next on the list we have Stun. Well, Stun is also pretty self-explanatory. This one is a 1 target, 3-second stun. You stun a person that's not going to be able to do anything for the next 3 seconds. I think it's got like 20 tile range, so, you know, you can use it pretty far away. And the best thing really to use this if there's a dude with a doomsday rocket launcher coming at you and is going to try to shoot you, well, stun them, and that's going to give you 3 seconds that he's not going to be able to aim. That will hopefully your guys will then be able to shoot him down and take him down. Or if, you know, you're going mostly for melee build, you can also stun an enemy that might otherwise shoot down your melee characters before they get to them, and that's going to give them the chance to get to them. Stun, actually a very useful one, but unfortunately just 1 target thing, so we're going to put it out here into A tier. Next on the list is Chunk Skip. This basically grabs 5 chunks near the caster and he drops them somewhere in the 25 tile area where you tell them to drop. It's going to be in random pattern. This is unfortunately not as useful as it might seem. You know, you can drop them somewhere and your guys can take cover if they're outside of their base. You could call that pretty useful, but in practice the chunks are not very good when it comes to cover. Also, if enemies are hiding behind the cover, you can actually take that away from them, but your caster has to be right next to those chunks, which means he's gonna be in harm's way. He's gonna probably get shot or stabbed. So not as useful as it might seem. We're gonna put this one into F tier. Next on the list we have a Solar Pinhole. This one is very interesting and very situational. Basically, it's in a small radius, it's gonna basically drop the sun on you. It's not gonna do damage, don't think it's that, but it basically just brings you warmth and light in a small area. This could be a lifesaver if you're playing on like an ice sheet biome and your ass is freezing in the winter. You drop that in there. Chances are that before you can actually get to a Psycast like that, you're gonna also already freeze your ass, and if you do get to that, you probably already built your base in such a way that you don't really need it. So not very useful. It could help in like a cold snap, basically trying to save maybe your crops from dying or something like that. But in general, really very situational, not the most amazing. I'm gonna put it out here into C tier. Last amongst the level 1 Psycasts, we have the Word of Trust. This one basically reduces the resistance of a prisoner. It does not recruit them, just reduces their resistance. So if you really want to recruit somebody fast and it's gonna be a very important colonist that you need, maybe a grower that can actually finally grow stuff for you, or a builder that can actually build those solar panels for you so you have power, something like that. This one is gonna be pretty decent in that regard. Otherwise, not that useful. It does not actually generate any heat, but it costs a lot of psi focus. So we're gonna put it somewhere in the middle of the pack into B tier. Now we go to level 2 ones, and next one we have Blinding Poles. This one is a small AoE, small targetable area, that is gonna blind everybody in that small circle. It can be very useful to maybe disorient some enemies that are shooting at you and make sure their accuracy drops so your melee dudes can run over to them and stab them in the butt. Something like that. That it can be used for that, or maybe drop it on like a clump raiders that are coming at you with melee weapons, and you reduce their hit chance that way, you know, so it can be pretty useful. We're gonna put it out here into B tier as well. Next on the list we have Water Skip. This one is really straightforward. It's small 3x3 area AoE that just drops water. It is useful for putting out fires, but let's be real, 3x3 fire, it's not dangerous enough that you actually want to use a Psycast. If you have a much bigger fire, then maybe, but then it's gonna spread again. So situational, maybe it gives you a couple extra seconds to save a colonist that is caught in a fire, or maybe to save some really good resources, but extremely situational. We're gonna put it out here into C tier. Next on the list we have the Neural Heat Damp. This one is actually very useful, or can be very useful. Basically it's gonna drop all of your neural heat into a targetable pawn, but it has to be an ally because he's willingly accepting that, right? It's gonna put them into a coma for 1 day, but it's gonna give your Psycaster a chance to cast more Psycast. You get the idea, right? The target does not actually need to be a Psycaster himself, so you can just target one of your allies, which is great. You know, they just go into coma, so it's useful maybe in a heat of battle when you need to, or you want to use a lot of Psycasts, but you are gaining heat really fast, to just dump on somebody, and that somebody could be like a non-violent pawn that you don't really use much, so you just have them stand there, take the heat, and then your Psycaster can go back doing their own thing. We're gonna put this one actually up here into A tier. Last amongst the level 2s, we have the Word of Joy. Basically, a target is gonna gain 30 happiness or 30 joy for the next couple of days, but at the cost of minus 20% consciousness. They're just gonna be slightly dazed, slightly out of their mind when doing that. This one, it kind of seems cool on paper. It doesn't even gain you any heat or generate any heat, but it does cost a lot of focus. But otherwise, I don't think it's really that useful. There are better ways to, you know, make people happy and give them joy, and dropping their consciousness while doing that is usually not the best. So in my opinion, when it comes to Psycast, this one is F tier. Now onwards to level 3s. The first one is Beckon. This one basically does this to one target amongst the enemies and pulls them towards the caster for a couple of seconds or until hit. Basically this is really amazing if they have like a very strong sharpshooter or something like that standing in high cover, and you just beckon them closer and they will walk out there and your people can shoot it. Or maybe if there's a melee character hitting one of your pawns, you can beckon them away from that pawn, and that time maybe other people has a chance to shoot it and take it down. So actually really useful. Unfortunately, you know, just on one target, but decently useful. We're gonna put it out here into A tier. Next on the list is Chaos Skip. Basically what this one does is it's gonna pull the target from where they are standing, and it's gonna teleport them into a random direction, random place, 7 to 25 tiles away from where they have stood. So this is random. It's gonna deposit them into a random place. Now it could be great to take them out of cover, but it can actually put them into better cover than they were before. It can put them behind your lines and they can shoot you in the back. Now it does have 1 second stun, but that 1 second is really short. It might not even give you chance enough to react. So if you don't have anything else to use, you know, this can be okay to bring enemies from tough cover, but otherwise it could cause more issues than it does benefit. So we're going to put it out here into C tier. Next on the list, we have the Vertigo Poles. This one I actually really like. It is a small AoE that lasts for a very short amount of time, but it causes dizziness and potential vomiting and people just wandering around in the same spot. So basically it's the best used if you have like a clumped group of enemies in cover shooting you. You drop this on them and they're gonna start being dizzy. They're gonna wander out of cover, they're gonna vomit on the ground, and your people are just gonna shoot them. It actually works great and I like it, and it's, you know, finally a smaller AoE, so you can actually do this to multiple people, not just one. We're gonna put this bad boy into S tier. If you wanna play the marriage broker simulator, then the next one, Word of Love, is for you. Unfortunately, it's not for me. It basically makes sure that if people will fall in love, that they will marry, there's gonna be no breakups. You know, you can target yourself and other pawn, or maybe 2 other pawns or something like that, and just make them happily ever after live together in love. And also in F tier down here, in my opinion, this one is not really that useful. Onwards to level 4 Psycasts. Now we have smokepop first, and this basically is a small AoE smoke cloud, and it works the same as a smoke launcher. So you can use this to give cover to your melee that they can go through and make it to the enemy ranged and stab them in the butt. You can also drop this directly onto an enemy turret, and enemy turret in that will not be able to aim at you. They will not be able to shoot at you, so you can send your people close by, stab that turret, or maybe just avoid it altogether. It can be pretty useful, but you can do pretty much the same thing with a smoke launcher, and a smoke launcher is pretty cheap and easy to get. So we're gonna put this out here into B tier. Next on the list, we have skip. This is not chaos skip where stuff is random. This one is proper skip where you can actually aim at stuff. You can move items or people, so you have a bonus of that as well. So basically what this does is just, you know, grabs a person, teleports it to another place. Now you can use this in many different ways. You can grab your melee pawn and drop it right on top of a bunch of ranged dudes and he can go crazy. You can grab their melee pawn and drop it away from your dudes, so he has to go back to you, so you have time to shoot him again. What else you can do? Do you know how chem fuel, before it explodes, it's got that animation before it goes boom? Do that to a pile of chem fuel and teleport that chem fuel on top of the raiders and watch it go boom. I love that, and for that, this bad boy deserves an S tier. Next on the list, we have focus. This one basically boosts a target moving, sight, and hearing by 30% for like a minute or two. So this is great if you want to play like a buff before the big battle kind of a class in RPGs, you know, so you can give buffs to people and they'll have their increased sight, so they'll be able to shoot people better. You can also, I don't know, give this to a doctor before they're trying to tend somebody, and if you're trying to tend them, you know, really fast so you can save them from bleeding out, something like that. It can be useful, but the buffs are not that amazing. You know, if it buffed manipulation, it would have been much better. We're gonna put that here into the middle of the pack, B tier. Next on the list, we have wall raise. This basically creates 3x3 wall at a target location that's gonna last for 4 in-game hours. This thing could be called pretty useful sometimes, but it's really situational. Basically, if your people are fighting out somewhere in the open terrain, you can drop this and it's gonna give them some cover. It can be used for that. You can also try to block enemies. Maybe, you know, you have an open door and there's a bunch of animals trying to get through. You might be able to drop this and block the door so they can't do that. One potential use is if there's a breach type of raid, and what you can do is let like half of the raiders through and then drop this down And while your people deal with the first half of the raiders, the other half of the raiders has to get in there. But this is really situational. It might not be that easy to pull off, although if you do, it could be pretty useful. Still, not the greatest. We're gonna put it out here into maybe high C tier. Last among the level 4s, we have the Word of Serenity. I really like this one because what it basically does, it's like a calming touch. It basically ends any mental break and it puts the target into a 6-hour coma, at which point they wake up and they are fine. This could be really good for like an emergency. Oh, this guy is going slaughterer, he's killing our pet Thrumbo and there's nobody close enough to stop them. Yoink, you use that on them, hopefully before they can actually get to that Thrumbo and put them to sleep. It's like an emergency shut off button that you can use. Now it does cost a ton of Psyfocus. It also scales based on how powerful or how strong the mental break risk is. So, you know, there is that. But still, if you do have the focus and you have the ability to use this, the Word of Serenity can be a lifesaver, you know, when somebody goes berserk or something like that. So we're gonna put this up here into A tier. Now we go to level 5 Psylinks, and the first one on the list is Berserk. I love Berserk because you can use it on enemy targets and they will start fighting each other, basically causing friendly fire. It's great. It's really great in that regard. Do you know that Doomsday rocket launcher dude? Make them go berserk and their people gonna shoot him. Or that big melee dude that is coming at you with that Persona plasma sword or something like that. You make them go berserk and their friends are gonna shoot them, and maybe he's gonna go and he's gonna chop to pieces half of their friends before they can even fight you. What is there not to love? I think Berserk deserves to be out here in the S tier. Next on the list is the Flash Storm. This basically creates a flash storm in a target area. This could be decently useful. Like the best use for this is if there's like a big group of enemies, usually tribals in that case, because they come in the biggest groups and they are preparing for a while, and you target that area, it might hit some of them and they're gonna run around and have issues, and you know, there might be fire spreading around them, especially if you live in an area that, you know, is pretty flammable. Or I think the best case for this is if there's a siege preparing to shoot you and you drop this on top of them, and the siegers are gonna start fighting fires that sprout around, and if there's any of the shells on the ground and you get lucky enough that it's gonna hit, they might go boom, and that could be in your favor. But unfortunately this, you know, it's not accurate. Of course not, it's the storm, and it takes a lot, it generates a lot of heat when you cast this, so it's not the greatest. We're gonna put it out here into C tier. Next on the list is Invisibility. This basically makes a target untargetable, unaimable at, whatever you want to name it. Basically enemies, you will not be able to shoot it for a short amount of time, and there's various things you can do with this. Basically, if there's like a group of enemies dropped nearby and one of your people is outside, you can make them invisible so they can run back into your base safe and sound. Maybe you can put this on a very good melee character that then runs towards the enemy group while they're trying to shoot you from afar and just stabs them in the butt. Or maybe you use this on a person that's gonna go trigger a mech cluster or something like that. But still, it's got its uses, it's pretty decent. We're gonna put it out here into A tier. Next on the list, we have Word of Inspiration. This one is really somewhere in the middle of the pack because it's not a real combat use skill or Psycast. You're not fighting it, you know, you're not using it to fight enemies. This is really for your colony to prosper a bit more, to be inspired. Maybe you get a doctor inspired so you can easily install some bionics. Maybe you get a tamer inspired so they can get a Thrumbo or something like that you always wanted to tame. It can be a really good, a benevolent Psycast. I think this one deserves to be somewhere in the middle. We're gonna put it out here into B tier. It's not really a combat thing. I'm gonna put it over here. Last amongst the level 5 ones is the Far Skip. This basically grabs the caster and people around him and teleports them far away on the other side of the map. This is basically most useful if you have a colony on one side and you want to get to the other side of the planet, and you grab, you go and start a caravan, and then you far skip that caravan to the other side. But the trick is, and that's where this doesn't seem to be so good, you do have to have another person on that other side acting like as a beacon to get those people there, which really makes it problematic. The only real use I can see this if you have like 2 bases and they're not that nearby, and then you can far skip from one to another when you need to bring resources. That could be like the best use scenario, but otherwise, caravans, I don't know if they're that good. You have drop pods and stuff like that you can use. So this one, we're gonna put it out here into C tier. Now we're down to the last ones. We are down at level 6 Psycasts, and this is where it gets interesting. First on the list, we have Berserker Poles. This is basically Berserk, but it's an AoE area. I think it's like 5x5, which means if you have a big raid and the enemies are clustered together, you can cast this on one group and it's gonna basically split the whole raid in 2, and they're just gonna start hitting each other. And you can just watch and laugh as the whole raid kills each other, and it's just glorious. Now, unfortunately, it does generate a lot of heat, so you're not really going to be using this a lot unless you have the heat dump as well, but it really makes it such an amazing thing. When you have really tough raids, you can just make them kill each other, and if there's anybody left standing, you can just pick them off and it's going to be easy money. So this one, once again, deserves to be up here in the S tier. Next, we have the Mass Chaos Skip. It's basically this Chaos Skip, but it's multiple people this time around. So once again, same uses. You can pull people out of cover, but you don't know where you're gonna drop them. They're gonna go into random location. So what if all those people you just pulled out of cover, they suddenly drop behind you and start shooting you in the back? Of course, there's that 1 second stun, but still, I don't really like the crazy randomness that comes from this, because it can complicate things even more. If you don't really have better Psycasts though, it can be pretty useful and pretty decent. But, if you do have a chance and choice, there are better out there. We're gonna put this out here into C tier, just above the singular skip. Skipping ahead, we have the Skip Shield next. This is basically as one of those shield packs that you can drop on the ground, and people are going to be shooting in there. They're not going to be able to shoot in there because the bullets are going to just bounce off. This one is a bit different because you also can't shoot out of it. So that kind of complicates things. So this is one of those that can be really useful to save your colonists, maybe from like a big doomsday rocket launcher, or maybe allow your melee dudes to close. It's pretty decent. It's not the most amazing, it's not S tier, it generates a lot of heat, but it can be very, very good to protect your pawns. And if you're playing a melee heavy playthrough, it's gonna allow your people to close in. So we're gonna put this one up here into like a low A tier. Next, we have the Manhunter Poles, one of my favorites out there. Basically, it makes the animals around in a quite a big, large area go mad. They're gonna go berserk, they're gonna go manhunter, and this is really useful if you want to break like big raids that you don't necessarily want to fight, and there's a bunch of dangerous animals on the map. So I don't know if you have some thrombos or maybe some bears and you just want them to go and attack raiders. What is there not to love? And then you just go and see as they smack each other, and you'll laugh and laugh and laugh from the inside of your base. It's not as reliable and as powerful as the berserkers, because the berserkers usually do have weapons, while the animals don't, but it can be still very useful, and I think it deserves to be up there in the high A tier, which is where we're gonna put it. Last but not the least, and definitely one of the more spectacular ones, we have the Neuro Quake. What this bad boy does is, after 12 seconds of casting, it's a really long cast, it's gonna basically make everybody in a huge area on the map around you go berserk. From animals to raiders to allies to everybody, even your own colonists, if they're not in the small protective circle just around the caster. So if you're really using this, this is like a last resort button you can press. You want to have everybody around the caster, and you want to be in like a protective bunker or something, because everybody's gonna go mad. Now, that being said, the caster is gonna go into a coma for 5 days because it's basically just so taxing. You're just gonna drop them on the ground, which, let's be real, is pretty hilarious. But also, if this is one of your best and most useful colonists, you're losing them basically for half a month, which can be problematic just to fight that one raid off, right? So really a last resort cast if you're fighting something that you can't possibly fight. Not only that, all of your colonists are gonna get mood debuffs for like -12 because apparently they don't really agree with this. All of the allies that are everywhere on the map, because everybody on the whole world map is gonna feel this, they're gonna all be dropping by 10 opinion of you because you're like, oh, you're crazy, what you done? You know, everybody's feeling this. This is insanity. And if there's any allies in the map and this hits them, which probably will if they're on the map, they're gonna go hostile right away and they're gonna hate you by a lot. So really, last resort thing, it can be extremely cool button to press, but it's probably something you shouldn't be pressing. I'm going to put it here in the middle of B tier. And that concludes all the Psycasts over here. Let me know if you agree with my ranking. What would you put into S tier? What would you put down here into F tier? And what do you think I have completely mislabeled here and should be somewhere else? Because I surely have done something like that. Thank you for watching. If you haven't seen my other rankings, links are up there and they are down in the description as well. So click on that and I'll see you next time.